I knocked on every telecommunications company's door in Chicago. I had zero experience in telecom. I had nothing. No one would hire me. One company took a risk on me, and I'll never forget this. First day I walked in the door, I said, "Who's the best sales guy here?" And they said, "Over here, Mr. Anderson. He's the guy." I said, "Is that seat open next to him?" And they're like, "Yeah." I said, "Great." And I literally glued my ear to the side of the cubicle and listened to everything he did. And I just mimicked, modeled, and mastered it. I became number 2 salesperson in 6 months. And then I ended up getting hired by a far bigger communications company called Lucent Technologies.
The Collaborative Entrepreneur. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast entitled The Collaborative Entrepreneur. This is the podcast where we seek to build partnerships with other entrepreneurs that can help grow and serve us in our own businesses. And I'm your host, Tracy Currington. And so if you've never been into the show before, it's collaborative because we want to be here. Cooperation seems like we have to be on the same space, but collaboration means we want to be here. We're going to grow because we're in this space. An entrepreneur, as I look at it, it's a person who has something within themselves and they're willing to take above the normal amounts of risk in order to bring it forward. And that's kind of a light version of the meaning of entrepreneur as a buzzword coming around. And if you've ever wanted to delve into the mind of someone who is entrepreneur-like in that space, just to find out, hey, how are they doing what they're doing and what are they all about? It seems like they're going places. I'd like to know more about them. If that's you, you've come to the right place, because today on the call, I have someone who has 3 decades worth of information to share with us today. Now, it won't take us 3 decades to get through it. We'll never be able to plumb that kind of depth in just one call. But maybe that just gives us a reason to have him back on the call. He's a mentor of mine in an accountability group that I'm involved in, and he's already added a lot of value to me in just the few times we got to meet together for about 45 minutes. He's got, as I mentioned, 30 years of experience in the leadership, scalability, business startups, especially in the software space. And I'm just excited to have him on the call. He's got a bachelor's degree in science with Lake Superior State University. He's also a lifelong downhill skier. And I had to look up how fast those people go because he's also an alpine racer. And I wasn't familiar with the term. And so I looked it up real quick to find out, like those in the Olympics, they're going like 60 miles an hour. I don't know if he's going, I'll ask him. I will find out about that. But in our conversation, we're going to be taking you through his business, what he's doing, his journey up through entrepreneurship, and basically in a nutshell, those 30 years, what he's involved in now, how he spends his time growing himself and what he's looking to do, who he serves. Our conversation will take a look into the story. What motivates him in business likely will motivate you also. I know that he'll serve as an inspiration to us also. If you don't have it already, get yourself a cup of coffee, depending on what time you're watching this, or maybe a spot of tea is what you need. Get yourself, I've got a remarkable, and that's my notepad today, and I'm looking forward to diving in today with Paul Routhier. And wow, go Google the last name Routhier. I've already heard some fantastic things about that. It's from French. Go Google it. Not now. Wait until after the show. Go Google it and find out about this man's family legacy. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. That was one heck of an introduction. My Lord, bringing the downhill skiing and that's kind of amazing. I didn't even know that was out on the internet that I do that.
I try to do my research, my friend. Tell me, okay, so I already brought it up. Before we dive into a quick bio sketch about the last 30 years and how you came into the space you're in, I got to know, how fast do you go as an alpine racer? I mean, like that. I'm not very nimble on I'm afraid about my knees when I'm on skis. So tell me about that. How fast can you go?
Yeah, so it depends on what type of racing you're doing. Obviously, if you're doing what's called the downhill, you can get upwards of 75 miles an hour. Cruising down the hill. Now, I didn't race the downhill. I raced what was called Super G. because I was a big boy racing. I actually raced on the college circuit for the Navy when I was stationed in Connecticut. So we had a team that we were going to college, so we were allowed to. We had a team, 2 guys from Vermont, 2 guys from the West out in Colorado, and then me from Michigan at the time. So I brought up the middle, but yeah, we raced in Vermont and the hills out there. So yeah, and I actually past couple of years, my daughter just graduated from high school, but I was actually one of the assistant coaches at the on the ski team here in Minnesota. So
oh my goodness,
congratulations. In fact, we have one girl that I'm keeping an eye on because I think she will be in the Olympics. It's
whoa.
Yeah, I'm like very excited. We've got some, you know, in the Minneapolis area, we've got some very strong Olympic players in skiing, of course, in hockey and some other things. So I'm always excited to watch what's going on here from the high schoolers around here.
That is awesome. Okay, so you're the skiing. I have to kind of trace back. Tell us a little bit about your last name, because I know it's maybe France, and then you got some Canada, and then is that where the skiing comes into place? Give us the bio sketch. Tell us.
I don't know where the skiing comes into place. I remember when I was 3 years old, my parents didn't ski. In Sault Ste. Marie, my godfather bought me a pair of skis for Christmas, and I was about 3 or 4 years old. And my dad didn't know how to ski, so he brought me to the top of the hill, snapped the skis on, pointed me down the hill, and let me go. And that is a true story. So it was kind of talked about being thrown into it, and somehow I made it most of the way down the hill and never stopped from there.
Wow.
So yeah, there's no skiing in my background, in my family history. Well, that's not true. I'm sorry. I have an uncle who flew. He was a ski jumper, the big giant jumps.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah, I just remembered that because he was over in Iron Mountain, Michigan, and did that. So I guess there was a little bit, but not really tied in.
Yeah.
But from the family standpoint, yeah, we've got some interesting, there's in Quebec, there's a school up there. Great grandfather wrote the French version of the Canadian national anthem. So just kind of some fun stuff in the family history for sure.
That's awesome. And of course, I already had great admiration for you, but now I have this, like, there's this mystique about Paul now. Like I did not know Paul was like an extreme sports guy, because when I'm thinking about alpine racing, I'm not just thinking like, you know, what is it, slalom or whatever it is, you're just kind of slushed down but like, I mean, alpine racing, you're cruising. And that just seems like pretty extreme to be going 50, 60 miles down a mountain. I mean, snow blowing in your face or whatever. This seems pretty extreme for me.
Yeah, in all transparency, that was a long time ago. Now I'm more of the cruiser. You know, we get on the. I still like moguls. But the old bones can't take it as much.
I get it.
But we try to make it up to. In fact, we're looking at trying to move to Montana, because in our retirement, I used to own horses when I was in Colorado and all that type of thing. So we're starting to talk about, you know, getting ourselves positioned to be out in Montana so I can, you know, ski in the winter and play golf in the summer, horses and do all that stuff. So
how fun. How fun. That's exciting. And the one thing I didn't know, first of all, thank you for your service in the military for our country. So how long did you serve in the Navy?
I was only in for 6 years. I was a navigator I was on a five. The big joke is I can drive anything from 0 feet long to about 510 feet long for boats. I grew up in the Great Lakes in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. Another piece of history, my father was a chief lockmaster at the Sioux Locks, and he was on duty and performed duty the night the Edmund Fitzgerald sang.
Oh,
so
wow.
the song by Gordon Lightfoot and all that's that's kind of part of our family history too. being involved in all of that stuff.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So I mean, yeah, we could talk for hours about, you know, weird family things that are going on in the Routhier family. So I'll just kind of.
But I mean, hey guys, you watching this program, that just means that there's a lot of layers to the onion in the Routhier family. And so Google it up, you'll find out more about that. Paul, tell us about your trip into the entrepreneur space, what you've been doing these last 30 years, leading up to what you do now.
Yeah, so it's been a ride, right? It's been a ride. I got out of the Navy and went to Lake State and marketing degree and all that good kind of stuff. And then I got out in the marketplace, and I was actually a marketing director at a casino, at a Native American casino. So while I was going to school, I was doing that. And some guys from Minnesota come over. They did these big SkyTracker searchlights. And they said, hey, we're opening up this company. We're opening up this company. What we're going to do is there's these brand new things called ATM machines. They were not the ones in the banks, but the ones in the gas stations. They weren't in gas stations. So he's like, we're starting to put a plan together to sell these things. We think you'd be awesome at it. And so I was one of the very first guys out there putting ATM machines in non-traditional locations. So I was selling to convenience stores. I'd never sold a thing in my life. Just kind of jumped on board, and I opened up an office for them. And they were out of Minnesota here, and opened up an office in New Orleans and did all that stuff. And then ended up leaving that, and I became a recruiter. I was recruiting for the telecommunications industry. So I was recruiting for Ameritech. I was in a place in Chicago, and these guys were making ridiculous amounts of money. I was like, I want to be into that, man. I want to do that. So I knocked on every telecommunications company's door in Chicago. I had zero experience in telecom. I had nothing. No one would hire me. One company took a risk on me, and when I'll never forget this. The first day I walked in the door, I said, "Who's the best sales guy here?" And they said, "Over here, Mr. Anderson. He's the guy." I said, "Is that seat open next to him?" And they're like, "Yeah." I said, "Great." And I literally glued my ear to the side of the cubicle and listened to everything he did. And I just mimicked, modeled, and mastered it. I became number 2 salesperson in 6 months. And then I ended up getting hired by a far bigger communications company called Lucent Technologies. So, and then that was it. I went from there to Colorado, lived in probably about 12 states. I've been startup for years, and just always wrapped around sales, marketing, business process guy. So I actually was a programmer at one time. I had a programming certificate out of high school. I knew 5 languages when I went in the Navy. And so all of that kind of gelled into this quasi very technical sales guy, right? And kind of went from there and went through all the classic trainings, ran sales teams, and I've been involved in startups ever since. So 30 years of really supporting. I had a couple of my own companies, consulting companies that I've sold off over the years. I did a startup which was 2-factor authentication, and did that, and it's been a ride. It's been a ride. Involved in startup in a long time. I love startup. I was like, I do not want, after Lucent Technologies, I said, no, I want to do it myself. Now, I've always helped other entrepreneurs get to where they're going. So I've always been with startup companies, either in just sub-leadership roles or in leadership roles. So.
What is the, there's just so much I want to ask. First of all, congratulations on all of your accomplishments that you've had over the course of these last 30 years. And I got to say, guys, if you did not catch the gold that he laid down with the Mr. Anderson story, that's awesome. I mean, like I wrote down, sit next to the best, like find a seat next to the best. And like, that was great. And then you said, mimic, model, and master it. just by sitting next, getting close proximity to those that are doing what you want to be doing.
I call it education by osmosis.
That is awesome. I love it. I'm writing it down. Education by osmosis. It's great stuff. So all of the achievements the last 30 years, what do you think would be the crown? What is the biggest accomplishment in this last, maybe it's, hey, my relationship with my wife or faith or whatever, but in the business sense, what do you think is your biggest accomplishment?
Well, see, I think accomplishments in themselves are, they're just steps, right? I look at life like a staircase, and I'm trying to get to the top. So I really ride off, and I mean, it's the most recent accomplishment, right? I have a client in Michigan who's been working with me for 2 months. We reorganized her company. We added steps into her sales process. We split her website in a bunch of space, and she calls me up and she says, she wants to, have an $80,000 a month, income from the company. She was at 40. I told her we'd get her there in 90 days, right? Because that's what we do.
Right.
And she calls me up and she says, Paul, I had to check the numbers. We're 2 months in. My closing ratio has gone from 40% to 80%. Our revenue went from $40,000. We're doing 120 this month.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And so it's like a drug to me, man.
Oh
it's like a drug, because every time somebody I'm working with or somebody I'm helping wins, and this is coaching. I mean, I coach 8th grade football. I coach ski team. My biggest accomplishments happen on a daily basis when one of the people I'm helping calls me up and says, we won. And they always say we won, like I was a part of it. I know you executed on what we decided to do. You did it, but I get as much, if not more, out of it. Just seeing that this last person, she actually did a video testimonial and she was in tears, and I went into tears because it's just that exciting for me. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't think I've ever quite heard that answer to the big accomplishments, but I was just thinking, like, what a powerful way to live your life, that like the biggest accomplishments is like my most recent. It's almost to say the best is yet to come. I'm not like to where you're not riding on, past trophies and that are collecting dust in a trophy case somewhere. You're looking forward. And that's what a coach does. A coach is always, I'm living in the present, focused on the future, instead of, living in the present and focused on the past, like therapists or something like that might do. And so our aim and our directive as coaches is totally different.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I mean, it's not even a mindset. It's just the way I operate, which is like, okay, that was great. Now, and I get that every day. I mean, it's actually quite addicting. So,
but what do you think when you're coming into a startup, and I know you've worked with a lot of startups and bringing them in, you enjoy that. You haven't maybe worked with them in a while, or maybe you have, but what do you think is what is the biggest hurdle that they have to overcome as an entrepreneur coming in and bringing something forward into life? Is it different? Is it the same for each? Does it depend upon the person, or what do you think?
I really think it depends on the leadership, and let's talk about it from this perspective. You've been 25 years at a major corporation, and you suddenly decide, I'm going to jump into entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you go, I'm going to make this jump, and whatever product or service or widget that you have is a great product, service, or widget. It's the best on the market. That's all great. But when you make that jump, let's take a step back. When you first started your job with the major corporation, you started your first day, you went into orientation. And they oriented you to all the departments and the processes and how everything works, and everything was there. It was provided for you. You had your HR, you had your departmental processes, you had the core processes, you had compliance processes, you had all this, and you had this big manual that you got to start your business. Now, you weren't going to know that everything the first day, but you knew that if you had a real question, that you could go down, you crack that manual open and you find it. And if you couldn't find it, you know, you could call somebody in that particular department to get the information that you needed to continue your day on. And then you're standing at the top of this big corporate and you jump off the building into a vacuum. Wow. And there's nothing there. There's no processes, there's no nothing. There's just you and your product and your service and the people that you want to give it to. And that is the vacuum that most entrepreneurs jump into. Whether you've worked for a major corporation or you're just starting up from scratch on your own, there is nothing there. You are jumping into the abyss of business. And it is an abyss until you start building processes and you have an idea and you need to promote that idea. So now there's a big sliding scale of your knowledge base to be able to accomplish your business. So how do you do that? So that's where I think the first measurement of how I help somebody is where they are in that process. So you'll hear a lot of people call it's a gap analysis. It's like where you are now, where you want to be, and what's the gap between, right? But I think the basis of that is the abyss that you're standing on. And then, you know, you're starting to build a house, right?
Yeah.
And what you see is a lot of entrepreneurs try to build the roof first, as opposed to building the foundation. So I try to identify that with the clients that I bring on or with whoever I'm helping, and just kind of identify where they are in that process. And you know, there's always two big questions that I ask right out the door. It's, what is the problem you fix and who do you fix it for? Because that's the underlying basis of marketability of your product, and your idea and how you're going to promote and who you're going to promote to and how you're going to get that structure down. And then building the first process is, you know, marketing and senior to sales, building your marketing process, and then your sales process, because everything's marketing until you're actually talking to the customer. Then
So good. So, man, you guys need to, like, if you're watching this again, go back and review the last 4 or 5 minutes. That was outstanding. That was, I think, when you talked 2 points about identifying with the person that you're about to serve, and then asking them those 2 questions. But when you painted you put this word picture together. You slowed down, you paused, which kind of made me kind of lean in, like it was like, I mean, it's just this, you know, just reeling me in with this story. And you painted such a tremendous portrait of what the early stages of an entrepreneur is like. I was like, this guy, you put it into words, like what it felt like for me to step away from what was familiar, what was comfortable. I had everything at my fingertips, processes already built. It's been known, it's been proven. Just do the thing and just, you know, punch in, punch out. Any questions, like you said, you can go to HR about, you can go to some manager about, they've faced it before. And now, like, you got me all the way up the tree, and here you were sawing off the branch. And I was like, hey, because you put me up there, and then you're like, okay, now jump into this abyss called entrepreneurship, where there ain't nobody going to save you. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to build it yourself. But and there's thousands of people that are up for that challenge. And that's what I felt like. So at first I felt like really afraid when you said, got up to the top of the building, now it's time for you to jump. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes me nervous. But then I thought to myself, like, you know what? So that must be why some retreat and go back in the first 3 years to their 9-to-5 or back there because of that fear of that unknown. And then there's others that, like, man, I was kind of like congratulating myself that, man, I've stayed in it for the last, 7-8 years and like hung with it. And I have built these things, and how rewarding it is to be on this side of it after gone through just like what you talked about. Thank you for that description.
Oh, my pleasure. There's nothing like a good movie, right?
Yes.
So-
Oh man, that was awesome. So okay, so through help our viewers to understand how does Paul grow himself? I mean, because you're helping so many people grow their dream, putting their dream out into the reality. And no doubt you've got a dream, if that's, going to Montana and that's where retirement's going to be. I'm not sure that an entrepreneur actually really retires if a coach just can turn it off and no longer coach anymore. But how do you develop and grow yourself at this stage of the game?
So in all honesty and fairness, I retired 2 years ago. Okay. It was kind of funny because I basically retired and I played golf for 2 months and my phone stopped ringing, and it was interesting. I got a phone call. A company was looking for a VP and they got a hold of me, and I did the interview just for fun, I mean, not to waste their time, but more of, maybe I might be interested. And I got on the call and I was so rusty. I mean, I was like, they were asking questions and I had to literally search my mind for information. And there were a couple of points in there where I couldn't find the right words. And I got off the call and I'm like, oh my God, I've become 85 years old. I've lost all my train of thought, my ability. I was literally panicked. I was like, I want to go to the neuro guy and get myself checked out, because I have never in memory been that bad on a phone call. And it made me realize, if I don't keep going, then I'll stop, literally. And yeah. I was like, oh, I got to find something to do. And fortunately, at the same time, I had to move a lot of money out of markets because I anticipated what was going on. I was looking for a REIT, or a real estate investment trust. And I found this guy, Grant Cardone, and I liked his REIT the best. So I moved a bunch of money down, and then they invited me down to this business boot camp. And at that point, and they were like, hey, you should coach for us. You should, and I'm like, hey, that's a great idea. What a way to not retire. I can help other people, but I don't have to, quote, run a big giant company or get dealt into a startup. So I decided to go that route. Now it compounded on me, because now I'm not running one company. I've got 23 different business plans that I'm supporting right now. So I threw out the one and added 23 different business plans that I support from a lot of different areas. Could be from leadership, could be from marketing. I'm supporting some HR function. So it just depends on the needs of the client, but I love it. I love it. It's actually great. I start reviewing this stuff and getting ready for the next meeting, and I'm just like, okay, this is where this can go. And it's different being a coach than a player. And when you're the player, you don't see the whole field. It's just like coaching football.
Right. Sure.
You're watching the plays from the sidelines. You can see what everybody's doing. You can tell them, you need to block better here. You need to shuck these blockers in this particular way because he's coming at you low. All that stuff. You get to sit back and help the entrepreneur see all the blocks and see the best route forward. And that's very rewarding. So so to your point, to your question, is how do I keep myself going? I am constantly training on a daily basis. I'm going to find out what markets are doing. I'm going to specifically for each client, I'm looking at what the market is doing. I'm looking what the industry is doing, and I'm coming to each of those meetings fully armed and ready to help those guys. And the only way to do that, I know there's millions of coaches out there, but it's the guys that really keep up on the craft and keep up on your industry that really can help you through what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that's so true. And I've heard the knock against like consultants is that they have a guaranteed best if used by date, because their consulting expertise, if they're not doing what you're saying, training every day, growing every day, they're still consulting with IBM, and we've gone way past that. That's just 1984 stuff, and we're in 21st century, because they got a shelf life. And so if you're not growing and like that, is it true then that does an entrepreneur, do they have a switch that they can just turn off?
I think I need you to rephrase that question. What does that mean? A switch that you
I'll illustrate. So like I'm passionate about what I do, and it's who I am, because what I do is what I am. And so my wife illustrates it by saying that, there's blank wall, the wall plates, that like there's a switch or there's electricity behind it. There's no switch to turn it off or on. It's just a blank, right? Hanging on the wall. And that's what my wife says. That's what you are. You don't have a switch. It's just on. There's a power source, and it's just on constant, and it never stops.
So I would say this, because I've been through a couple of divorces, and my wonderful, beautiful wife at this point is completely aligned with everything I do. And I would say this, because I've done something interesting. My wife is a high executive at a major corporation, and we have kids, and we made a decision 7 years ago that I would stop traveling because she had the stability job, and that I would find a position that I didn't have to travel so I can manage the kids at the same time, which I did. And our daughter's heading off to Ohio State this year, so we're empty nesters. A Buckeye. So, and it pains me, I must say, when I put on that Ohio shirt, my University of Michigan skin starts to burn. My goodness. So,
I'll bet it does.
But to that point, is there at some point quite consciously, I realized that there has to be a switch. That for me to grow in the sense of business, which I love, I had to allow my relationship with my wife to grow in the same way. So there is a switch that shuts off at a certain time of day, that on certain days where the cell phone literally doesn't go with me, it just goes away, and that I'm spending time with them. I make sure. It's interesting, I had a client that asked me the same thing. He was at the bull run in Spain a few weeks ago, and he was spending 5 weeks in Barcelona with his family. He was concerned because he owns a business in France, and he's like, I just can't get time to get things done. And I said, here's the problem: is you're not blocking your time. What you need to do is you need to block your time, not only for your business but for your family. And he goes, yeah, but the kids keep running in. I said, block your time and go away. Go to, a coffee shop, go to a nice library, whatever you can find in Barcelona, and don't tell everybody where you're going, and tell them you'll be back in 2 hours. Block that time, get what you need to get done. That way, and here was the big thing, the big point of this is that way, when you get back to being with your family, you are present of mind with your family. You're not thinking about the things that you didn't get done because you got them done. And it goes both ways. And somewhere that came into my life, and I realized it. And that's when everything grew together, as opposed to pulling apart, right? I stopped having to make the decision between my business and my family, because they both were getting 100% from me in their little block of time.
That's really good. Thank you, Paul, for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. That was great. I was when I was thinking about your journey through that, and because we started out with like your accomplishments and you're looking at it as a staircase, like you keep on going, you got your eyes forward and your focus. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And I'm in this stage of, I'm 47, so I'm not at retirement, and I'm still, I'm in fifth gear plunging forward. And I'm just thinking, like, the word that kept on coming up when you're telling me about your stage of life and where you're at right now. My wife and I, we have 8 kids. And yes, we've been married for 26 years. They're all ours. We never intended to have that many kids, but our oldest 4, they're, of course, out of high school. Our 5th one will graduate in 2024 May. And so, we'll have the other 3, and the youngest is 9 and the oldest is 14 in those youngest ones. But just thinking about all of that, the word that kept on coming up when you were saying that for me was discipline, about disciplining yourself to if you got a blank plate on the wall, removing it, put a switch there and discipline yourself to turn it, to flip it down because we're there together. So thank you for that. I feel like I'm sure there's somebody else on this call, you needed that too. I can't be the only one. So thank you for that. No. Just developing that muscle, because there is, I don't want to have that torn. I mean, I've come this far, 26 years with that woman, and I'm going to continue going that way, being the father to my children, being the husband to my wife. But I also want to grow this business, and I've got about 5 different businesses that are launched right now that I want to grow them all, and I'm pushing them all right now. But then having that, if I had that switch and I developed the discipline to just trigger it down, I would not lose my main thing. And my main thing is going to be my family.
Yep. So my statement is, I hear it all over the internet. You can't have it all. Yes, you can. You just need to put it in the proper boxes and open them at the right times.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so I got 1 or 2 more questions. The first one is the big life lesson that you love sharing with people. What is the big, because that was huge for me, and that made I
was just going to say that is the big life lesson.
Okay,
because ultimately I shared it with you prior to you asking the question, because there's no bigger lesson than that you can have it all. You just can't open both boxes at the same time. And that's opportunity cost. That's things we've learned throughout our life, just in the proper placement. It is the fact of, if you, to open one box, you need to close the other. That goes for the family too, right? That it goes the opposite way. That period where you're focused on the business, you need to be able to close the family box. My partner is really good at doing that, right? She's really good at taking some of the brunt of the stuff that goes on with the kids when I'm knee deep in, and vice versa. When she's in Europe and doing a business trip, I'm on the pulpit. It's my turn. So that is the big life lesson, because I didn't have that prior to my current wife.
Yeah. So. Wow, it's good stuff. Thank you for that. Let's suppose there's a younger Paul, there's a younger entrepreneur watching the show today, and they're hearing about your stage of life and all the things that you've learned and grown into, and even the tremendous wins you're giving people today. What could you advise them as far as getting started, like to help them prepare for this step that you illustrated of taking that plunge into the abyss, as you called it? What advice would you give them to prepare for that?
I would say, the one thing we didn't have 30 years ago was all this information that's on the internet. And that is a blessing and a curse at the same time, because there is a ton of information out there with people, trying to bring money into their own environment, not specifically knowing what they're doing and telling everybody that they're knowing what they're doing. So what I would say is, number one, put yourself in a group of people who you aspire to be. So I like to say you're only as good as your 5 best friends. Right. Wrap yourself up. If you want to be an entrepreneur, get yourself wrapped up with 5 other entrepreneurs that are doing better than you, or actually better. Wrap yourself with four entrepreneurs that are doing better than you, and one that is not, that you can bring up.
Okay.
I always get this picture of the Marines trying to climb a wall, and they're all stacking on top of each other and pushing each other up to get to the top of the wall. And then the top Marine gets up there and he climbs over and then he puts his hand over and starts pulling everybody else up, right?
Yeah.
That is such a truth in the business world. You're only as good as your network. So focus heavily on building network. I think Grant Cardone says your network is your net worth. Yeah. I would also add to that, your network is how you learn and grow and help you to get to where you want to go, because you cannot do this in the vacuum by yourself. You have to pull yourself out of the vacuum because you just jumped in. Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to how you started the call with Mr. Anderson.
Yep.
I was just like, go sit next to the best and learn from them, lean on them. So Paul, how can if somebody watching this right now, they'd like to learn more about you, find out how maybe you could serve them. They're that entrepreneur that's with that software startup, or they're an executive. How could they work with you?
Yeah, they can just go to www.clevelandrain.com and fill out the stuff, or you can link up with me on LinkedIn. I'm an open networker, and Facebook, Instagram, all of them, I'm out there. I'm happy to talk to anyone. And if anybody wants help getting their business started and getting growing, reach out. I'll get them to the right place.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and what you've learned. And this is what 2 years into retirement looks like.
Yeah.
Oh,
I almost cringe when I say that anymore, but yes.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the call and for following the Collaborative Entrepreneur and TMC Coaching. You can learn more about me and what I do at tmccoaching.org. If you'd like to have more information and get on a call with me and see what I can do to help you, you can email me at tracy@tmccoaching.org. Until next time, everyone, make sure that you find people just like Paul. Surround yourself with people just like Paul, or find yourself your Mr. Anderson. Get seated next to them, because great people like that, they can elevate your thinking and they'll inspire you to dig deep and be able to do more. So until next time, everyone, thank you and take care.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Collaborative Entrepreneur Podcast. Be sure to like and follow and turn on notifications for future episodes launching every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you're an entrepreneur wanting to be on the podcast, you can let us know by emailing us at tracy@tmccoaching.org. Let us know the industry you're in, as well as your biggest wins and learns that you've achieved along the way. If you want to find out how you can work with Tracy in other ways, you can do so on all major social media platforms under 180 Turnarounds. You can also find us on our website at 180turnarounds.com. So until next time, guys, let's win together.